Hey, Learning for Good listener. I appreciate you joining me each week to get tips and tricks for nonprofit L&D pros. I love sharing my experience and bringing you top guests from the field. But I'm not the only one doing the work around here. This podcast is edited and produced by my friends at Idea Blossoms. Idea Blossoms partners with consultants and organizations who either have or want to start a podcast. They do everything from the initial podcast launch to monthly podcast management and can support you with audio and video editing, as well as content repurposing if you want to share key ideas through blogs or newsletters or social media. I'm sharing this for two reasons. One, I am so grateful for Idea Blossoms and how they help me bring episodes to you each week. But two, I know many of you have or have considered offering a podcast as part of your learning strategy. As a key contributor and sponsor of this podcast, Idea Blossoms is offering an exclusive 30% discount for Learning for Good listeners, applied to the first invoice. They have 2 spots open for 2025, so head to ideablossoms.com or email Rosa at ideablossoms.com to get started. You can find links in the show notes, and don't forget to mention the Learning for Good podcast to claim this incredible offer.
Hey friend, do you want to offer meaningful learning solutions that create behavior change, fit in the flow of work, and yield real results for your nonprofit? If yes, this is the podcast for you. Join me as I explore instructional design and leadership development best practices, as well as change management, belonging, and influence. If we haven't met yet, I'm Heather, and I've been in your shoes. I'm a learning and development consultant and founder of Skill Masters Market. Before starting my business, I led learning and leadership development initiatives for a large national nonprofit. I know what it's like to need to develop your staff quickly and effectively and to build the relationships and cut through the organizational layers to be successful. And I'm bringing all of that to you in this podcast. So block your calendar, turn off your Teams or Slack chat, and let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. I have a fairly established presence on LinkedIn. Not tons and tons of followers or something like that, but people tend to know and recognize that I work with nonprofits. That's what I mean by that. So I often get DMs with questions like, what types of L&D roles are even available in nonprofits? And what types of nonprofits are hiring these L&D roles? Who are they creating training for? How big is their L&D team? Are they all these super lean teams? How does one find nonprofit L&D jobs, and how do you really get into the sector? And I love the nonprofit sector, and I love these questions, so I decided it was time to do something about it. In January, I kicked off Career Conversations, a series of LinkedIn Live conversations with people currently in nonprofit L&D roles. We are talking all about their organizations, their teams, and their personal career journeys. And today I'm bringing 2 of those conversations to you, my Learning for Good listener. We'll hear from Nadra Dennis of Center for Employment Opportunities and Dr. Jaimie Hoffman of Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. And I can't wait. Let's dive in. It's Learning for Good. First up, it's Nadra Dennis. Welcome to our LinkedIn Live. We are so excited to kick off the Career Conversation series with you all today. This will happen monthly for at least the first few months of the year. We're excited about this. We'll kind of go into a little bit about why we're doing this and that kind of thing as we get started. But we're excited to kick off the Career Conversation series. I can't wait for us to get started. Thanks to those of you who are joining us. I know a lot of people clicked that they wanted to attend today. And so we're super excited to have you here with us. The Nonprofit L&D Collective is a private community for nonprofit L&D pros. And we have people in that community from, I think we're up to 6 countries now, over 80 nonprofits represented as well. And this is open to even more people because it is a LinkedIn Live. So it's for people who might be in a nonprofit or might be looking to transition into a nonprofit. So we might reach even more countries than we have in the collective. So super excited to have you here. All right. So we are going to jump in and spend a little bit of time today with our first career conversation guest, which is Nadra Dennis. And I'm super excited to be able to introduce her in just a few moments. So when I started this series, there were a few questions that came to mind that I get sometimes from other people, knowing that I consult nonprofits and do L&D work with nonprofits around the country, that I host this private community for nonprofit L&D folks. And so these are some of the questions that I hear quite a bit. And I'm super excited to start this series so that we can share more about the nonprofit sector. What types of L&D roles are available in nonprofits? What types of nonprofits hire L&D roles? Who do they create training for? How big is their L&D team? How does one find a nonprofit L&D job? How do you get into the sector? I get questions about nonprofit L&D careers a lot. And so this LinkedIn Live series, which will eventually end up on the podcast Learning for Good as well, is here to start answering some of those questions. We are meeting nonprofit L&D pros and learning more about their organizations, who they create training for, how big or small their team is, and so much more. Plus, we'll get to hear their career journey with all its twists and turns. These are the perfect events for you if you are in nonprofit L&D or are considering a pivot to nonprofit. Today is our first official career conversation, and I couldn't be more thrilled to kick this series off with Nadra Dennis from the Center for Employment Opportunities. So let me tell you a little bit about Nadra. Nadra is the Director of Learning and Talent Development at the Center for Employment Opportunities. Since joining CEO in 2020, Nadra has established and evolved a learning and development strategy aimed at strengthening talent pipelines, enhancing employee performance, and increasing a sense of belonging. Under her leadership, her team has introduced a comprehensive performance management process, provided all staff with access to over 10,000 courses via the LinkedIn Learning Library, and launched 2 large-scale leadership development programs. She has collaborated to launch CEO's first learning management system, centralizing all training within the organization, introduced skill development resources through their intranet, and established standards for training design and delivery. Her team has launched book clubs, employee development days, a coaching program, and an onboarding buddy system, all designed to foster a culture of continuous learning and development at CEO. Prior to her role as CEO, Nadra led the design and delivery of extensive training and development programs for both students and staff at Georgetown University and William Patterson University. She also coordinated large-scale events, including community initiatives, conferences, and concerts for audiences of up to 3,000 people. She holds an MS in Higher Education and Student Affairs Administration, a BA in Media Production, and a BA in Communication Studies from the State University of New York, Buffalo State. As a certified Clifton Strengths coach, a proud immigrant from Jamaica, and a theater nerd, Nadra brings a diverse perspective and deep commitment to empowering others through education and development. I am so excited about this. Nadra, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I cannot wait to dive into your career and your current nonprofit role.
I'm super excited to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to just share with folks what I've been through and how I've gotten here, because I really value having spaces where you can learn what kind of path you can take. So thank you so much for having me on here.
Yes, I am so excited. Let's start with learning more about your organization. We talked a little bit in your bio about some of the things that you've done there. We'll dive into that a little bit too. But tell us, what is the Center for Employment Opportunities? What's your mission there? Who do you serve as an organization?
We serve folks who've been incarcerated before. Our goal is to help them get back on their feet and stay on their feet by making sure that they're getting immediate, effective, and comprehensive employment services when they get back. And so I really appreciate the organization for just essentially putting money in folks' hands when they leave incarceration, giving them the skills that they need to build careers and get back into their communities and really reduce recidivism while also improving public policy and economic opportunity. So CEO not only is committed to the individuals who were incarcerated and their families, they're also committed to changing policy so that they can sustain a life after coming back.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I've seen a couple of organizations that have a similar mission, but I think, what you all do is really unique. It's not something you see all the time. And the fact that you're helping families, you're helping individuals, and you're at the policy level really makes such a difference. Now, you are in an L&D role there, obviously. Tell us more about what you do specifically.
So I'm the director of learning and talent development. And so I manage a team that oversees performance management, design and delivery, some systems at the organization. I can share a little bit more about that. And then some job scoping and compensation work. So I lead that team of 3 people. We recently added another person, so we're at 3. And at CEO or L&D team is pretty split as well. I'm not the only L&D team member there. So we've got our central staff and our program team, and our program team works directly with our participants. And those are the people who have a justice impacted background. And then my team works directly with employees. So all full-time staff, we've got over 650 employees, and those are the people that we serve.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've seen organizations where there's a lot more centralization. I've seen it where it's a lot more decentralized. And I like the separation that you all have right now with kind of program focused and then kind of serving kind of your client or customer base and then staff. It sounds like you have a large enough staff to really have needs there as well, which is great. So I mentioned in your bio that you all are offering LinkedIn Learning. What else are you offering from a training perspective? What types of training do you do for staff? What modalities are you typically using? That kind of thing.
We do a host of training, and I want to share one of the things that is important for us is not just doing training, but creating the right solutions. And so our team is very focused on making sure that you have what you need, and that might not be training. It could be coaching. It could be a job aid. So those are the things that we're focused on in terms of how to serve the organization. So we've got LinkedIn Learning, and that gives everybody access to whatever training that they might need. To drive that, we've created LinkedIn Learning communities and LinkedIn Learning minis. So smaller programs that really support community learning, more social learning around LinkedIn Learning, even though it's an individual thing. You get in your group, you debrief what you've learned, and then you apply it to your role and come back and talk. So we've done things like that with LinkedIn Learning to be able to drive impact and really help people see, well, how does this thing that I have on this computer apply to my job in real life? Some of the other things that we do on my team include performance management. So we manage our 90-day reviews, performance conversations, coaching programs, and soon enough, we're going to be doing 360 reviews. And we also do a lot of partnership across the organization, as well as job scoping, compensation, and career mobility work. So we cover a wide range, and I can share a little bit more about that if you want.
Sure. Yeah. I'm curious how you are identifying what those needs are, which LinkedIn learnings to promote and create solutions around. What needs a job aid? How do those needs bubble up in your organization? What does that look like?
There are a few different processes. When I started, our company didn't have this department. And so we built it from the ground up. And so I was able to send out an overall survey, find out where folks were at, talk to managers, talk to department heads to find out, well, what are the needs right now? And then move that way. Then as we evolved and built this program, things just bubble up naturally. So we make sure that we're involved in other parts of the organization. So we're in meetings, we are in senior team meetings for listening, we're on site to make sure that we can hear firsthand what is happening. And then we also have connections with senior leads and hear what challenges they're experiencing. And then we design from there. But for right now, our team is actually working on stabilizing our performance resources at the organization. And so some of the projects that we've been focused on are redesigning our central trainings so that they're more learning centered, more learner centered, they're easier to understand, and there are less of them. So that's one of our challenges that we had across the organization, is that there are so many trainings. It's overwhelming, folks. And so that was one of the main projects that we took on, just to look at all of the trainings that we had and see where we could decrease it. And I'll share that from our central side, we were able to move our trainings from 80 to 34 trainings and resources. And people might be like, oh, but more training doesn't always mean that it's working. And so that's what our focus is, trying to find out if our trainings are actually doing what we need them to do.
That makes sense. And I've heard that from other organizations as well, especially with the content libraries. There's so much content. It's how do you really narrow it down and focus in on what's needed? So was really curious to hear how you all were identifying needs and creating different solutions to meet those needs. So tell me a little bit more about your team. You mentioned you have 3 team members now. So we know how big it is, but what's everyone's role in the team? What does that look like?
Yeah, we've got a learning management system administrator, and she supports our learning management system and our intranet, as well as she does some training design and delivery and manages our employee development day programs, where we give all employees 2 development days and they can do whatever kind of development is going to be best for their role. And we also offer monthly trainings on like our own special curated dates. If you don't want to think about what specifically you want to design for yourself, you can go and do that. And so our LMS admin leads that. We've also got a talent development specialist, and they're responsible for the performance management process, conversations, 90-day reflections, and soon onboarding. And then we've got a project manager who is responsible for job scoping, compensation, and career mobility. The other thing that I think is unique about our department, maybe not unique, but important to know, is that we don't do our work alone. And so we leverage staff members by creating staff roles. And so we've got our culture and learning ambassadors, and that's a group of about 18 to 12 staff members who get trained on delivering trainings that are important. So we've got our DEI trainings, we've got trainings around performance, how to do your performance conversations. Those staff members are trained and paid to deliver those trainings for us. So that frees up our time to not be facilitating trainings, but also give them the opportunity to grow and learn in that area. And so we've got a few more of that. And then we also contract with instructional designers and facilitators.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I love how you've added capacity to your team for a variety of different ways. I'm curious, we are going to shift and we're going to talk a little bit more about you and how you got where you are. Why nonprofit? And why this organization or this sector or this role? Like, what was important to you about this?
I've always been drawn to people-centered work. I wanted to make sure that I have the opportunity to connect people with the skills that they need to succeed. And that was the thread through higher education. But I fell into nonprofit. I'm not going to say, oh, I left it. I knew I wanted to be a nonprofit. I went on LinkedIn. I found this job. I started to interview and I was like, I like these people. I like this company. They're asking me the right questions. They are cardigan people. I like to say that when I look for roles and where I want to be, I look to see whether or not somebody the company is a t-shirt person, a cardigan person, or a suit person. And I was like, these are cardigan people. They're real cool. They're comfy. But they're still like doing what they need to do. And so I found CEO on accident. I had no clue what reentry was. I didn't know people were working in this space. And then when I got here, I saw the value of it and the importance of reentry and the impact that it was having. So yeah, I fell into nonprofit, but I've learned so much from being here. And I think it's also given me a lot of opportunities that maybe I might not have gotten in higher ed or could have taken a little bit longer. I think there's a little bit more flexibility because it does ask you to be more creative with your people resources. And that's how programs like or cultural learning ambassadors were formed. We're like, we need to deliver more trainings. What can we do that both supports our employees and supports the thing that we're trying to drive towards? So I did not have a direct intentional path to nonprofit. I ended up there and I now know like the impact that CEO has had. And I really am just like excited about CEOs as a whole and their impact. I've seen them do so much. And one of my favorite things actually that I've seen them do over the over the time that I've been there, it's not even like the policies that they've made changes with, or even the impact that they've had to people. The fair chance hiring button on LinkedIn and Indeed. if you go in, you can filter your jobs and see whether or not an employer is a fair chance hire. And I just thought like that was an amazing thing that was so important to people. And those are some of the small things, the small changes that really impact people's lives, where I'm just like, this company is really great for what they do.
I love that. So I read your bio. I shared a little bit about your background, but I think it's always different to hear it directly from the person. So Nadra, how did you get where you are today? Tell us a little bit about your career journey.
How did I get here? So it was a winding journey. I started out in undergrad with the intention to go into editing and movie production, and somehow ended up here. I think through my activities that I did in undergrad, I did a lot of leadership that required me to essentially design workshops, even though I didn't know that was what I was doing when we were designing general interest meetings for students or being a resident assistant. Those are some of the areas that like led me to working in higher ed permanent. I really enjoy training. I love building a team of resident assistants, and this is the thing that I want to do. And once I started doing residential living at William Patterson, I still fell deeper into training development and design because I'm designing training for RAs. And I'm like, no, this is the thing I want to do. And so that led me to Georgetown, where I'm working to do advising and training design and helping student organizations do that. And so as I'm doing that, I keep getting deeper and deeper into the training aspect and learning that there is so much more to this, and I can design trainings that are impactful and really help people get what they want, what they need. We had a thing at Georgetown called the Blueprint Training, and it was where all the student leaders had to take this super long training and learn all the things. And it started all pretty strong. And I came in and I was like, well, how can I make this more accessible? How can I make it easier for students because they don't have the time to go in and learn all of this or to stay in a 6-hour training? Like they want it to be shorter and they want it to be easier to access. And I think that is the thread of my career, is just learning. I want to make sure that people have the right resources that they need and not just push training as the answer for everything. So that's my pathway, is through higher education. And then I was like, I want to get paid more. And so I left higher education because it wasn't giving me what I needed as far as a salary. And then I came into nonprofit. And I'll say, I know nonprofit, it's not on par with corporate pay, obviously, because we are a nonprofit. But I'll say that my company, I've seen them actively work to make sure that folks are getting paid equitably. They do pay reviews every year and make sure that the scales are right. And I see that work happening within my team. So it's something that I'm pretty proud of in terms of that. So yeah, my career has been through higher education and just continuously picking at training and realizing that there's this depth of experiences that I can have. And I just keep peeling back the layers and finding more places to be.
That is so true. And so many of us fell into learning and development and started in a different path and then discovered this desire, this love for training, and just slowly moved our way into it. So I'd love to hear people's career journeys. It's never too late to reinvent yourself if you have this motivation for learning and development. With that, I do know that there are many people who are looking to transition into nonprofit L&D. Maybe they're transitioning into L&D for the first time. Maybe they're in L&D, but not in the nonprofit sector, or maybe they're in nonprofit and they might be looking for their next role. So what advice would you offer someone who is looking to make a transition like that and get into L&D or get into the nonprofit sector?
Pick your niche and hone it. I'll say once I realized like I wanted to do more training, I wanted to lead departments that were responsible for training, I went and got a certification from Georgetown because it was free for me. I worked in higher education. They paid for a certain amount of tuition. I think I got a project management certification as well as training facilitation certification and the Gallup strengths assessment. So I realized like I want to do coaching. I want to do facilitation, and started to get certified, and then create experiences for myself. So Georgetown was starting a class where I could help, a wellness class for first year students. I volunteered to do that. I worked with the counseling department to create the courses. So I just kept finding more opportunities to gain the skills and then apply them. Was there a program that I could create? Is there a mentorship program that I could be a part of? Then I did that and just refined my skills and improved and deepened my experiences with training until I felt like, okay, I think I'm ready and I have enough transferable skills to be able to move. And so I would say definitely hone the skills that you have, pick your niche, because there's a wide range, right? There's instructional design, facilitation, just so many more, but pick the niche, pick the thing that you want to do and keep diving deeper into it. Invest in your role, learn, network. I won't say that I got my job through networking. I did it through cold applying. I've gotten every job that I've ever gotten through cold applying. I went, found the job, applied online, interviewed, and then got it. That's it. So I haven't even leveraged my network in the way that I should yet, but I think it's going to, my future is probably going to ask me to do a little bit more of that. But I would say build your network, get to know people, and the people that are around you, get creative and use them to build things and to experiment and to innovate in the name of where you currently are, right? Find a reason to be able to create something that's going to be impactful for your department, but also that you can put on your resume, that folks will be able to say, oh, this was a really great thing that you did. I want you to have that here as well.
That's great. I love how you just made opportunities for yourself along the way. So, Nadra, thank you so much for sharing about your organization, about your career path. I really appreciate you joining me today and sharing that. We do have a couple of questions in the comments, so I would like to share those with you. One, going back to your organization, how do you assess effectiveness?
So one of the projects that we're working on right now is standardizing that process across the organization. Because as I said, we're divided into central and program, but we still serve similar audiences sometimes, or paths cross. Right now, we're using the Phillips method, which is just a variation of Kirkpatrick's 4 levels. And so we're trying to see what's the standard information that we need and that we collect regularly, and then use that to assess effectiveness. But we also listen to people. When people send me emails and they're like, this training has impacted me in the following ways, here's how it's changed my job, here's how it's changed my life, then we're like, okay, that works as well. So we take in both qualitative and quantitative feedback to know whether or not something is effective. We also make sure that we're tying it to business needs in the first place. I want to say that wasn't always, I don't think that's how we started out, but that is where we transitioned, is to make sure that we know exactly what's going to impact the overall business bottom line. And then we tie the programs that we're doing to it. And then we use either the LMS data to tell us whether or not it's an observation of, can the person actually do this thing that we've taught them, or quizzes. So we leverage a bunch of different ways to figure out whether or not a training or a program is effective. But I think the thing that's most important is to know what the outcomes are of the thing that you're designing first, and then you can measure from there. So that's how we work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I had a podcast episode that released recently talking about measuring effectiveness in federated organizations and membership associations, where it can be a little bit more difficult to measure because they're not necessarily your staff. And I had a very similar response of like, first thing first, make sure you're headed towards the business goals, because if you're not, it doesn't really matter if you measure it. Not going to move the needle on what you're looking to move. And then trust that you're doing that. And then once you've done that, start to think through how you can start to measure those things. So thank you for sharing that. I will also add, now that makes me want to put on my research hat, my data hat, and see if nonprofits generally are more cardigan organizations. We'll see. So one more question. This one's also from Susan. Nadra, do you feel certifications make you more marketable?
Yes, but I don't think not having them makes you less marketable. And I think it's about the experiences that you've had and whether or not you can articulate your impact. And you have had impact. There's something there. And I think that during my transition, I leveraged groups like the Expats of Higher Education, and there are a few L&D folks that I follow on LinkedIn. and learn how to write my resume and improve my resume, but mostly how to evaluate my career and go back and look at my experiences and pull out the impact that I've had both quantitative and qualitatively to be able to reflect that on my resume. So yes, I think certifications make me more marketable because I've chosen ones that align with my career path. So I don't put like my first aid certification on my resume because it doesn't help. But having my facilitation experience at Georgetown, yes, it makes me more marketable. If you don't have it, can you still progress? Absolutely. But you've got to be able to communicate the impact that you've had at your organization on your resume and in your interviews.
Great advice. Nadra, thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome. I had so much fun, and I hope folks are able to get what they needed out of my conversation. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any more questions.
Great. Thank you, Nadra. Do you wish you could connect with other nonprofit learning and development leaders? I know what it feels like to want someone to bounce ideas off of and to learn from, someone who really understands you and your work. Imagine if you could have a simple way to meet people in the field, ask questions, and share information. That's why I created the Nonprofit Learning and Development Collective, where nonprofit L&D, talent management, and DEI leaders can connect with each other quickly and easily in a virtual space. When you join this community, you will walk away with a new, diverse, and powerful network and a sounding board for your staff development needs. So if you're ready to exchange ideas and collaborate with your peers, come join the Nonprofit L&D Collective. Nadra shared so much good insight into her career journey and how her organization, the Center for Employment Opportunities, works. Now I want us to hear from Dr. Jaimie Hoffman from Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. And we're super excited to have you with us, Jaimie.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here with folks. And the work you do is just so important, Heather, because I know when I pivoted to nonprofit, I was like, I want to talk to other people who are going through similar things because it is actually quite different than the for-profit space. Yeah. So that is valuable. And also, I have a lot of people who I speak with who want to know, how do you get into either L&D or nonprofit L&D? So I think this is awesome for them. And I'm going to shut my door because all the grown-ups are getting involved right now. So you'll see my screen blank for one quick second.
That is fair. Jaimie, I want to know where you're joining us from, and then tell us more about your 4 dogs.
All right. I'm joining you from Southern California. I live in a beautiful beach town called Ventura. That's about 50 miles from LA, which makes it seem close, but it's actually not too close to LA because it's traffic at the whole thing. So dogs. I have 3 dogs. No, I have 4 dogs. Sorry. 3 of them are doodles. And then the last one is a rescue dog. That's a mutt. And she does not get along with the doodles. It's a whole situation.
Oh, no.
You know how people say, I'm not sure if 1 kid is enough. I was like, 3 dogs? No, we can have a 4th. This is cool. Well, 3 was probably enough. But what am I going to do? I've got that we call her sometimes the black dog because we've got the 3 tan dogs, and Journey is her name, and she is a journey.
Aw, I love that. Funny story, when I was pregnant with my 3rd, I was talking to someone who already had 3 kids, and she was like, you know what? I often think how much easier my life would be if I had stopped at 2. And I was like, that's not what I want to hear right now. No, sometimes
people pick the best times, don't they?
Sometimes that's the way it goes. So with that, let's jump in to our career conversation. So with over 20 years of experience in higher education, Dr. Jaimie Hoffman started her career in student affairs and services, which sparked her passion for making a meaningful impact in education. She also had the opportunity to serve both as a full-time and adjunct faculty member, including 2 years teaching full-time at the University of Southern California. She currently serves as the Senior Director of Learning and Development at Big Sisters of America, where she leads training initiatives for 230 agencies and over 30,000 volunteers nationwide. Her work focuses on mentorship, youth safety, mental health, and leadership, and she is the primary facilitator for the Executive Leadership Institute. And in 2025, this year, she will launch the organization's People Leadership Academy. An ICF certified coach, Jaimie provides career coaching and consulting through pivoting out of EDU, and recently authored Exploring New Paths, a workbook for educators considering career pivots. A lifelong learner, she holds a doctorate in leadership from UCLA, along with degrees from Arizona State University and California Lutheran University. Based in Southern California, she enjoys crafting, CrossFit, and balancing life in a lively household with her husband, 2 daughters, and the 4 dogs that we just heard about. So, Jaimie, I'm super excited that you joined us today. And I did not know until today that we were both CrossFitters, so that's fun.
I've seen your CrossFit posts, and you look way more bad ASS than I do, but I'm like, wait, can I say that word on LinkedIn? Will it eliminate me from the show here? But anyway, yeah, no, I kept meaning to tell you. Yeah, and you have also got that, have that in common.
I'm a very mediocre CrossFitter, so no problem. It's not hard to keep up with me. I am so glad that you joined this conversation. Again, I get asked questions all the time about learning and development and how do you get into this field and what does it actually look like? And then specifically nonprofit, like how did you get there? And what do the different nonprofit L&D teams look like? How big are they? And who are they creating training for? And all of these questions. And so as I started to think about that, and I get these questions all the time, there are clearly people who are very interested in this. So maybe we should just take it to LinkedIn Live and start having some of these conversations so that people can get that inside look. So I'm excited that you joined us and are going to share more about Big Brothers, Big Sisters of America, more about your team, your role, and then your particular career journey as well. So we're going to start at Big Brothers, Big Sisters of America, obviously a household name, but let's start there just in case there's anyone who is not familiar with your organization. What is it? What's your mission? Who do you serve?
Absolutely. So Big Brothers, Big Sisters is the largest one-to-one mentoring organization in the U.S. Certainly, there are others that really focus on group mentoring or even location-based sort of settings. And ours really focuses on making meaningful but monitored matches between adult volunteers who we call bigs, hence it takes little to be big, and children ages 5 through even young adulthood who we call littles. So our organization, we help to make those matches and to monitor them. And what's super cool about our organization, we recently were able to partner with a university for a longitudinal study about the impact of mentoring in our programs. And they were able to compare that to people who didn't participate in our programs. And people who have been littles are 20% more likely to enroll in college and even earn 15% more over their lifetime. So a lot of times people, or even now we're looking at government funding, they'll look at the immediate and they don't realize that at the end of the day, if you invest in creating meaningful mentoring relationships, it really pays back even more so than what was invested in. And I would be remiss if I didn't state that there are 30,000 youth on the wait list across the United States, and we need mentors. And I bet all of you listening out there would make a rad mentor. So go to bbbs.org or Be Big Now. Now, I sound like an infomercial, but truthfully, it's very easy to be like that because which transitions into another topic. I really believe in the work we do.
I love that. And we can maybe drop those links in as well. So if anybody's looking to get involved, we can drop those, make it really easy for people to find out.
Nothing. Yeah. And one thing I should clarify too. So I worked in our national office, which when I spent a lot of my career working in higher ed, I'd often be like, oh, I wonder what it'd be like to work in a nonprofit. And I only ever thought about looking at local nonprofits. And that was awesome. But by and large, the pay was just not something that I could move to, and especially at the position level I was at. So it's worth just noting that there are national sort of umbrella organizations for many large nonprofits that is something to consider. So anyway, yeah, so we work in the national office. And as you mentioned, we have 230 agencies that we serve across the US, and they're really the stars of the show. Our job here is to just empower them and give them resources and help see them be awesome.
I love that. And thank you for clarifying. I worked in a national office when I was working internally at a nonprofit. So I'm very familiar with how those structures work and what that looks like. But some folks might not be. And so thank you for just clarifying that there are these local agencies throughout the United States, but then there's also the national office. And a lot of times in these larger nonprofits, both are hiring someone who is doing some type of L&D work.
Exactly.
As you're looking at L&D jobs, anybody out there, just be aware that sometimes you're going to find them locally and then also find them nationally or globally as well.
Yeah.
So with that, Jaimie, tell us, you're in an L&D role there. Tell us more about what you do specifically.
Yeah, so I oversee our L&D function, which is really the strategic direction of our department. And also, I get to be in the weeds and help build learning experiences, which I feel like is worth noting because that was something I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to mostly be strategic, but also get to build learning experiences and be a facilitator. So what's worth noting is that our department is in our agency growth team. We are not located in human resources because the goal with the training that we create and the learning experiences is to power growth within our agencies, ultimately targeting more volunteers, really is the ultimate goal. We do have a federated model. And so what that often means for us is that our agencies, they can very much function independently as long as they're adhering to some, or not some, but all of our standards. But there is a lot of fluidity there. And so what we try to do is when we do create learning experiences is to make sure that there is some customization that each of our agencies are able to make. We are growing what we offer quite a bit because I loved Nadra's metaphor of the cardigan suit t-shirt. Now I have a metaphor of what stage of an organization you want to join. So it's either, do you want to join an organization like when it's very startup-y and it's like a jungle and you've got a machete and you're chopping down the path completely? Or do you want a dirt road where there's some familiarity created for you, but you can really influence the direction? Or are you like a highway person where the rules of the road are created? There's not much wiggle room. And honestly, there is nothing wrong with any of those three, but it is useful to think about what fits for you. And for me, I love being on a dirt road. And although I work for an organization that's 120 years old, our national office has undergone some changes. And there is some great stability and foundation. Like, for instance, we have staff training that we provide that is always been provided with regard to training staff how to foster youth safety and well-being, and program manager and staff certifications, things like that. We have enduring programs like for volunteers, an onboarding experience for them. But there's a lot to be built. And I love to get to do that where we're really adding in the value, adding additional value to our network. So we've got more coming, as you mentioned, like the People Leadership Academy and things like that. But we do serve a variety of audiences. CEOs, I facilitate our Executive Leadership Institute, volunteers, our parents and guardians, and staff at our network. And that was all what drew me to this position, honestly. And I think probably why they saw me as a strong candidate from working in higher ed. I worked a lot with volunteers. So that's, oh, and also, can I just share one thing? Sometimes we get to do the coolest projects. And we had a partnership with Universal NBC, and we launched something called the Wicked Kindness Challenge, which my team member, who's a learning experience designer, Blair, made it look absolutely beautiful. But it was all in partnership with the launch of the movie Wicked and to spread kindness. That was like a dream project. And we were paid to do it. It was so much fun. Anyway, so that's just a little random little sprinkle in there.
Yeah, that was so fun. I signed up for the kindness challenge and it was so fun to watch. And I know Blair as well. So really fun to see her work come to life as well. That was very cool. So you're offering all kinds of different training, all kinds of different audiences. Are there certain modalities that you typically go with as you're creating training? What does that look like? And then we'll get into more about your team.
Yeah, by and large, what we offer is online, mostly asynchronous so far, but we are moving toward more of a blended learning format to really optimize the use of that synchronous time and the asynchronous time. But we have agencies who they deliver training to their volunteers and they want like a meeting in a box or not a training in a box. So we'll create an asynchronous training that can be done in our LMS, but also here's what you need if you want to deliver it in person. And then also we have some conferences that we do each year that are obviously synchronous and in person. So for scalability, it's tough to do a lot synchronously, but we are looking to launch a peer training program, although I like Nadra's learning ambassador title. That was cool. But yeah, we're looking to launch that for scaling up because we do have a lean staff, which I know is a future question.
Let's get to that. So tell us more about your team. You're creating training. You said executives, staff, volunteers, parents, and guardians. There's a whole lot of people out there. I think you mentioned, or maybe I mentioned in your bio, there's over 30,000 volunteers alone, right? So tell us about your team. How big is your team and what is everyone's role? How are you creating training for all of these people?
Well, very carefully, I guess, because we are a lean team of total of 3. Myself, who I fly at the 30,000 altitude and then occasionally with different projects and closer to the weeds. I have Blair Brown, who is a learning experience designer. And then we have Michael Withrow, who is our director of learning and technology. And so Blair, primarily when we have decided on a sort of learning experience to create and execute on, she's the one that will build them. And Mike manages LMS. And then we leverage other people in our national office. Well, I shouldn't say we leverage each of our departments. They do offer various trainings, like our comms department. They'll offer webinars and things like that. So our goal is to empower them with good pedagogy so that when they are offering the trainings, they're how we want them to be to really change behavior. And then, of course, we work with some vendors as well. With grant funding, it's worth just sharing with people that it's a lot easier oftentimes to be able to get one-time funds to hire vendors than it is permanent positions. So that's the reality of the nonprofit world.
Yeah, absolutely. As a nonprofit consultant, a lot of projects that I've worked on have been grant funded because there is a specific need. There's a specific outcome you're driving towards with that funding. And so it's easy to scope that out and hand that piece over and work collaboratively with someone.
Yeah.
So you have 3 people in your team and you are creating training for all of these different audiences. Do you have 1 or 2 kind of outcomes that you're looking for as you're creating your training at the national office?
I think, generally speaking, of course, we're really always trying to figure out which of these learning experiences that we want to create best powers our strategic plan. And our strategic plan actually has 4 pillars to it. And so that is a factor that we're always looking toward. We have really been prioritizing volunteer matriculation and growth because that is just a key. If we don't have volunteers, then, our programs really can't survive. So we have a fair amount of volunteers sign up and express interest, but there's a lot of dropout. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And one of the things I'll do with my peers is a gap analysis to talk through all of the different reasons there's dropout. But we have some data that does indicate that like training is an inhibitor. Our onboarding essentially for volunteers is, or was anyway, an inhibitor for people feeling like they could execute on our mission. So that is a big outcome, broad outcome. But I have like a lot of dreams about what we will one day be able to sort of assess, because much like any good learning professional, like we want to see changes in performance. That becomes a little difficult when you're looking at volunteers, because they're like out in the world doing their thing. As far as, you know, we can look at the bare minimums, like how many complete training and things like that. But it is more difficult than being able to look at performance changes on the job like we want to do. But that's even difficult in a federated model, because not all agencies have the same roles. So have to refer, I don't know if it's going to show up, but I got this really cool, okay, I'll have to drop a link to it. It's called Performance Focused Learner Surveys. And so anyway, two of the things that we assess for every learning experience is Net Promoter Score and people's perceptions of the likelihood that they can apply what they've learned. And the reason I refer to this book is because they cite some research on the fact that if people feel likely that they can apply, that there's an actual relationship to whether they can apply it. Before reading it, I would have been like, oh, that's an indirect measure, just asking people if they think they can. But this book, I nerded out on this book, and it does appear that there's a relationship there. So we're just tipping on the surface of assessing that. But our trainings are, especially our newer ones, are getting like 70 plus Net Promoter Score and always like strong likelihood to apply, which is amazing. Yeah.
That's awesome. So thank you, first of all, for sharing all this about your organization, for hearing about your team, where you all are headed. Jaimie, I want to hear more about you. I know people are always curious about, how do you get to nonprofit? How did you end up here? So I want to focus a little bit on you for the next few minutes. So why nonprofit? Why this organization? Obviously, it's very meaningful to you. Why this sector? Why was this important for you?
Absolutely. Happy to answer that. I worked in education for many years, and it was part of my identity to be in education and to higher ed specifically, and to mentor students. I absolutely loved it. I also found myself frustrated with some elements of higher ed and the pace with which change, all of the things, which I can share more about. But at the end of the day, I sought different opportunities. So I did work in corporate, and even right before joining Big Brothers Big Sisters, I actually worked for a finance company. And what I will say is that at the end of the day, no job is perfect. Like, it's just not, even if you're working for yourself, there's challenges with that. And some days there'll be frustrations, of course. And I wanted to know that I could say, well, at least I'm making an impact. I'm working for an organization that makes an impact. That just became so important. You know, we spend so much of our lives working. And if you're like me, which probably most people listening to this are, there's also a lot of energy and cognitive load we put toward working, that it just became a factor for me, that it just was clear that I wanted to do something that made a difference. And I will say that last week I went to Capitol Hill for a Capitol Hill Day and advocated on behalf of mentorship with agencies. And it's those moments where you're just like, yep, this is why I do what I do. So that's why.
I love that. And I think we have some other nonprofit people listening in. So I'm curious to know if that resonates, if you had similar reasons for joining nonprofit. If so, let us know that in the chat as well.
Yeah.
And then I'm not seeing any questions yet about your organization, so we'll continue on. I read your bio at the beginning, but that's a little bit different than hearing in your own words. How did you get here? So you're here because you want that impact, you want to have that meaning in your work, but how did you get here?
Well, in a sort of technical sense, truthfully, I got to where I am, not to be super cheesy, but through the support of mentors. And it wasn't just people saying you can do this, but I was a first generation college student. So someone was like, you should apply to UCLA for your doctoral program. And I'm like, they're not going to accept me there. And look at that. Not only did they, but I completed. So people don't realize that small conversations, little relationships you build with people, they can really change lives. And in fact, someone that was a mentor for me when I was in grad school, his name is Luis Garcia. He works for Big Brothers Big Sisters of America. He's also got a 25-year career at agencies before he pivoted to the national office. And so honestly, that's how I became aware of the organization. But I had quite a few pivots in my journey. I thought I was going to teach middle school music. Why? Because my band directors made a big influence on my life. There's a thread there, but I'm really glad now that I have children that I saw a different path, because I don't know that I would be that successful at that. I did get my bachelor's in music, but I pivoted to higher ed because I just really enjoyed that relationship I could make with college students, notably. And I was fortunate to teach concurrently. So I actually have a similar story to Nadra. We both originally started as RAs and in higher ed. But I went the faculty route once I had kids because honestly, the lack of flexibility was just didn't work. So I went to be a full-time faculty member. And you know what's interesting is I feel like a lot of times we put jobs on pedestals through imposter syndrome or whatever. We're like, I can't believe I got a job teaching full-time at USC and teaching full-time, people getting their master's and doctorate. I was like, wow. Well, and by the way, if anybody's wondering, yes, I got my doctorate from UCLA and I taught at USC. There's no conflict in my life, though. UCLA all the way, just to be clear. But at any rate, I didn't stop and think, well, how do I derive my power and my energy from the day? Is it reading long papers all day long? No, it's actually not. I loved teaching and the actual act of being in the classroom, but some days I'd just rather watch a good Survivor or Love is Blind than to sit and prep for some of my classes and reading these really long papers. So anyway, I just say that because I do think like a lot of times we'll be like, this is a dream job. And then I'll be like, but why? Because it sounds cool. Like my husband loves history, but do you really want to teach history to people who don't want to learn it? He's actually a special ed teacher. So anyway, I left higher ed and worked adjacent to higher ed in ed tech for 5 years. I loved it, but my role was primarily student support. And I just feel really drawn to learning and development because I love helping people better themselves through learning. And I also hate boring learning experiences. So I wanted to be part of making good learning experiences. And I had a pivot to that finance company. Terrible experience, but great learning experience. And here I am now in the nonprofit space. And I feel like I've found my niche, both in nonprofit and definitely L&D. I love the fact that there are so many different types of roles. I think Nadra actually explained it well. In the last company that I was at, there were 130 people in our L&D team. And there was like literally a team of people who just facilitated training, a team who just assessed training. And so there is that opportunity to really specialize. And there was a team of people who really seek to understand the problem that the training is seeking to solve and then to craft the learning strategy, which was actually my role. And I just realized I don't want just a little piece of the puzzle. Like I want to be able to see the entire journey. So I specifically sought work at a smaller on a smaller team so that I could really feel more invested and connected to the entire learning experience. So that is my experience. And I should say, you know, coming from education, a lot of times people we're literally not trained to see that our skills transfer outside of education. And in many ways, you feel like you're like leaving a religion if you leave education because you're in it for the students. And again, there's no path forged for you. And in 2020, a friend of mine and I, we realized that maybe we should share our journeys. And so that's when he and I kicked off Pivoting Out of EDU as a podcast, which over the last couple of years, we have not been consistent with updating. But I just think it's important for people to really, first of all, if you work in education, you're in a nonprofit for the most part, unless you're at a for-profit college. So there is that synergy there. And also, don't build your identity based on one sector. A lot of people who work in L&D, they'll move from mental health related companies to mentoring companies, right? It's a different type of work, but it's not entirely that different than education. So anyway, I think probably I added in some advice for specifically our pivoting educators there, but that's my journey.
That's great. The other thing that I was going to say, Jaimie, you talked a lot about mentorship and its impact on you specifically. And one of the things I'm so excited about this, one of the things we're looking to do inside the nonprofit L&D Collective here in the future is start a mentoring program so that we can connect people inside of nonprofit L&D, because there are some of those kind of just unique things that exist.
Yeah.
Profit and be able to connect people so that there is that intentional one-on-one mentor connection as well.
That's awesome.
So yes, so excited about that. Okay. So you did offer a little bit of advice, but I'm going to my last official question for you. It's also a question in the comments from Denise. What advice would you offer someone who is looking to transition into L&D or pivot into the nonprofit sector?
Well, I'll start with the not shiny rosy side of things. I just want to be real. Since I have been working with people pivoting for the last 5 years-ish, the time it takes to get a position has extended. So it used to be 3 to 6 months, and it is now, I am seeing on average, it's taking about a year. And I would say for me, it was about the same, but it was probably closer to 6 months. I was pivoting from L&D to L&D. So I think it's just important to set realistic expectations for yourself. That is not to say that it takes that long for everyone. Most of the people who are able to pivot faster have made some sort of a connection with someone at a company and have gotten a referral, truthfully. I hate that in some ways because it's so much about the social capital that you have, but that is also why mentorship is important, because we can spread that social capital. But as far as things you can actually do, I think it's important, first of all, to immerse yourself in the world of learning and development. If you're looking at this as a career path, there's a very good likelihood you've got the experience and the skills, but you might just not know what it's called, especially for people who have worked in education. And so I do follow various learning leaders on LinkedIn, join the Association of Talent Development groups, because then you get to just expose yourself to the terminology that's being used and the more popular topics, all of that stuff. There's also and I'm not really a big book reader. I think we covered that. Thank God I have a doctorate, because I get to be but still, I did finish that. And then the Love is Blind series. But there is a book called Telling Ain't Training, which really helps folks understand that just basically by doing a lecture, you're not really training people to do things. And there's a second one called Training Ain't Performance. And I just absolutely love the way these authors lay out their lessons, because they actually make it interactive, which is exactly what they're preaching to do. So I highly recommend those two books. And again, most people that are reading it, you'll be like, oh yeah, I knew this, but it's just the language and it just helps you. I'm not a big proponent of going and getting additional certifications. And well, I shouldn't say I'm against it. I just don't know that it's necessary. And I don't think at the end of the day, it's the differentiator for getting a position or not. I think it's more about how are you transferring your skills. And I actually do have, and I can share it with you, but I have a podcast episode that we did in like our first season many years ago. Benny, that makes me sound ancient, but a few years ago, that just talks about how to translate your experience in your application materials. But it's so much easier to do it in the application materials if you're able to just do it in general. So that's the advice that I have for folks. But just to stay persistent, remember that you can look at your local nonprofits and the national nonprofits. And some of the local nonprofits, especially like our agencies, sometimes their training positions are in the umbrella of an HR position, which is both. So you get to do employee relations and learning and development. So if you're particularly strong in one area like L&D, that doesn't mean you wouldn't be a candidate for the position in general. So keep an open mind to that as well.
Great advice, Jaimie. And yes, we can definitely link to your podcast episode as well as any of the books that you've mentioned in the comments. If anybody has questions, maybe you're watching this after it's live and you have questions or something comes to you later, feel free to continue to populate those questions and I'll continue to monitor those and I can tag Jaimie in as needed. Jaimie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
This was such a great, this was such a great conversation. It's always interesting to hear what's going on inside other nonprofits. If you're listening and you are in a nonprofit, you're a nonprofit employee, you're working in some sort of training, leadership development role, join the Nonprofit L&D Collective and get inside looks just like this all the time, plus a great network of nonprofit L&D pros.
Awesome. Thank you so much for offering these, Heather. I think I learned a lot from the last one I listened to, so I'm excited to stay engaged in listening. And yeah, thank you on behalf of everyone who, benefits from this content.
Thank you, Jaimie. This career conversation series has been so inspirational. It's fun to get an inside look at the different nonprofits and also to get to know these nonprofit L&D pros better. If you're looking to transition into the nonprofit sector, there are a few things you can do. The first is to follow me on LinkedIn. I do share jobs from time to time, and I share a lot of great insight about what it's like to work in L&D in nonprofit. The second is to join my email list. I send a weekly email newsletter with nonprofit L&D jobs. And the third is to attend an upcoming career conversation on LinkedIn. I do plan to continue this series. And if you're already in a nonprofit training or leadership development role, join us in the Nonprofit L&D Collective. It's the only community specifically for nonprofit L&D pros by L&D pros. I'll see you next time on Learning for Good. Hey friend, was this episode helpful for you? Did you like what you heard? Do you want more content like this? Here are 3 things you can do. Hit subscribe. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Share this episode with a colleague. This means so much to me personally. I read every review, but it also helps me learn what content you like most so I can create more of what you want. All right, turn that Teams or Slack chat back on when you're ready, and I'll see you next time on Learning for Good.